Night Fever by the Bee Gees, or Bee Gees, is a disco classic, and it starts right on an instrumental chorus with these hypnotic drums played by Dennis Byron. Now, in the verses and the pre-choruses, the drum groove is essentially the same, except he takes out those little hi-hat scoops and plays a more straight, driving hi-hat pattern. And it's in here somewhere that they took the drums and made a tape drum loop for Staying Alive. Now, you won't find your typical disco percussion parts in Night Fever. There are no hand claps, there are no conga drums, there's no cowbell, but there is a triangle. Now, the bass guitar is played by Maurice Gibb with a pick and is the driving force of this song, and it also establishes the arrangement. Just listen how simple the verse is. And when he gets to the pre-chorus, it gets a little more syncopated, a little more funky. Now, what's interesting about the bass when it hits the chorus is it becomes more sparse, leaving more space between the notes, leaving room for the vocals to be heard, and also leaving room for the drums to punch through and drive more. And here's a bit of the bass and drums going from the pre-chorus into the chorus. Now, we know there's no typical percussion in this track, but there is percussion, and it's being played by rhythm guitar, and literally rhythm guitar. The strings are muted, and it's going through a wah pedal and what sounds like a phaser, and this is inspired by 70s funk music. Now, they double track this guitar part, and then they hard pan one on the left side and the other on the right side. And because these parts aren't playing a precise, repeated rhythm, they're both spontaneous, and because it's in stereo, it's creating this lively, percussive feel. And notice how those guitars have a slightly swung feel, and when you start with the drums and add these guitars, you'll see that it's giving this looseness or this swampy kind of vibe to it. And these guitars switch to sustained chords when it hits the B verse, or maybe some would call it the bridge. But whatever you call it, listen to the footwork on the wah pedal. Now, there's another rhythm guitar part that comes in on the choruses, this time playing the chords in a different funk rhythm, but on that same track, when it goes back to the verses, they kick in a distortion pedal, making the verses heavier than the choruses, which is the opposite of what most people do with distortion. Now, giving some weight to those distorted guitars, at least at the beginning of the section, is this piano chord, and this happens only twice in the song, which together sounds like this. And while we're on keyboards, there is a stereo track that switches between harpsichord and electric piano, depending on where we are in the arrangement. Now, there are live strings on Night Fever, and we first hear them at the top of the song at the instrumental chorus. And just like in Staying Alive, in addition to those real strings, there's a synthesizer playing a more basic version of that part. And when you play them together, it sounds more full, and you're not necessarily aware that there's a synthesizer in there thickening things up. And also in the string arrangement is a track of violins, and you can hear them sustaining these high notes going from the pre-chorus section into the chorus. And this is what all the strings together sound like there. And here's what they sound like with the vocals.
Living on the music so fine, born on the wind, making it night fever, we know how to do it.
Now, there's a definite arrangement to the vocals as well, and we first hear them in the first verse with Maurice Gibb singing, and he's double-tracked, which means he sung the part twice, then they were mixed together to sound like one rich vocal.
Listen to the ground, there is movement all around, there is something going down, and I can feel it. On the waves of the air, there is dancing out there. If it's something we can't share, we can't steal it.
Now, I'm sure you heard at the end those two vocals weren't completely in sync with each other, giving a sense of spontaneity and energy into the performance. And when it gets to the chorus, there's two sets of vocals because they're singing in octaves. And here's the lower octave.
Night fever, we know how to do it.
And the higher one.
I get that night fever, we know how to do it.
And together.
I get that night fever, we know how to do it.
And there was some spontaneity in those vocals as well. And there's even more in the outro choruses. And this is a good place to end our little journey into Night Fever because the Bee Gees were known and famous for their great vocals. And a reminder, too, for those that don't know, that this was in the days before computers and before autotune. They recorded directly to analog tape, real musicians singing and playing their instruments.
We know how to do it. Feel like forever, baby, don't you lose. Give me that night fever. We know how to show it. I'll leave you never, baby, don't you know. Give me that night fever.